Hello, 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 hello. I am John Beckman, Professor John Beckman, Dr. John Beckman. Coming to you live from Southern Command with half my brain tied behind my back. Just to make it fair. All right, little video today. Technical discussions 009. This is a technical discussions 009. All right, let's understand that this is just a free speech, my opinion, just my opinion. As a molecular biologist who has studied molecular biology for many, many years, more than a decade, and published many, many papers in the field of molecular biology. Nevertheless, this is my opinion. Don't take anything I say as medical advice. But I do want to make a video documenting why I made the decision that I made. Hindsight's always 2020. There was a lot of cloud and fogginess, fog of war during the COVID situation. Nobody really knew what the correct decisions were, but I made personal decision not to get the vaccine, and I'd like to outline my rationale for that, which hasn't changed since the beginning and is looking like I was somewhat correct. Okay, so caveats before I start this discussion. I am not anti-vaccine. All my kids are vaccinated against normal things. I believe in vaccines against diseases that are deadly or severely life-changing, like polio. So I'm not anti-vaccine at all. On the other hand, I am pro-immune system. And there are many diseases that we overtreat. I think we give out too many antibiotics. I think we over-vaccinate. And there are many diseases that our immune system could be strengthened if we focus on keeping our health and fighting these things off. So I think that in general, we don't want to create a vaccine for every single possible disease on planet Earth. Otherwise, you could create a system where the human immune system collapses. So I'm pro-vaccine, but I'm also pro-natural immunity. All right, with those caveats made, I'll walk into the rationale of why I did not get the COVID vaccine, the messenger RNA vaccine. One, it was pretty clear to me early on that the COVID response was irrational. I mean, when we started early on, we started to see things like the school systems. We would try to take our kids to go outside and play, and the school systems had put police tape around the playground equipment. So, which was irrational because the virus was less likely to spread outside, and UV radiation from the sun apparently decontaminated the surfaces. So it'd be better to be outside. And so you could immediately detect that there was some irrational behavior during the COVID situation. So that already kind of like raises red flags. Okay, so the second thing is that the COVID vaccine, again, this is a opinion from a molecular biologist. The COVID vaccine, it's not really, you shouldn't really call it a vaccine. It's gene therapy. So what they're doing is they're giving you a gene, messenger RNA, technically not a gene, but from a gene, okay, the spike protein. So there's a gene that codes for the spike protein, and that spike protein gene can be transcribed into messenger RNA, and they can package that messenger RNA in their delivery particles, and that's what they're injecting you with. Okay, that's not a classical vaccine. A classical vaccine is when you take a virus particle, which is called a virion. Okay, so viruses are like little machines. So imagine you have some kind of virus. And those machines have separate, discrete pieces to those machines, okay? They have outer proteins, they have inner proteins, they have their genome, whether it's RNA or DNA or bipartite, multipartite, segmented genomes, okay? So essentially, viruses are these machines constructed of multiple components. And a classical vaccine will take virions and you can heat and activate them so you kill them. So they treat them with heat. The heat will essentially destroy the infectiousness of the virion particle. Okay, so you treat this thing with heat, and you get some kind of like essentially like a broken machine that has all the parts left over, but it's non-functional. And then they inject you with that. That's a classical heat and activated vaccine. The advantage of a classical vaccine is when they inject this into your body, okay, your immune system can build what are called antibodies, right? So these are the proteins in your body that recognize and help fight off diseases. The antibodies in your body can recognize, get a different color for this with the green. So the symbol for antibody is kind of like this Y. Okay. So your body will synthesize antibodies. Okay. And if you do this heat inactivated version where you're injecting the whole machine, but broken, your body will be able to synthesize antibodies to all the different parts of that machine. So this is what would be a broad spectrum immunity. Or maybe you'd call this, like I have some experience making antibodies, maybe you'd call this like polyclonal antibodies, where you have many different kinds of antibodies recognizing different parts of the machine. And so if you ever get infected with this virus, a different virus, different strain down the road that's similar to this virus, you have many, many, many antibodies built up against all the different parts of this machine. And so you can effectively like shut it down. Okay. How do the messenger RNA vaccines differ from this? So the messenger RNAs are not, the messenger RNA vaccines are not giving you broad spectrum immunity against all the different parts of the machine, okay? The messenger RNA vaccines are only giving you immunity against one component of the virus, which is the spike protein. So imagine if you created you're creating a situation where you're only producing antibodies against this one part of the machine, which is the spike protein. So again, classical vaccine is going to give you broad spectrum immunity, polyclonal antibodies against all the different parts of the virus machine, whereas a messenger RNA vaccine is only going to give you one antibody against one particular part of that machine, which is encoded in that messenger RNA. Now, this is a very narrow spectrum immunity, okay? Because it's very easy for viruses to mutate. I mean, when you're dealing with virus populations, we're talking millions, maybe trillions of individual viruses, and each one of those is different. Each one of those is acquiring mutations. Viruses mutate very, very fast. They have polymerases that, by design or by evolution, have a very high error rate because they want loss of variation in the population. So it's very, very easy for viruses to change one thing about their machine, okay? So imagine you have immunity developed against this blue spike protein. All the virus needs to do is make one single point mutation, which is probably the easiest thing possible for viruses to do. I mean, this is literally what they do. They change all the time. All it needs to do is make one single mutation. Now that spike protein, again, it's sort of like a stupid analogy, but the blue spike protein is now a green spike protein. And now that immunity is no longer effective at all. Okay. So that's how easy it is for the virus to escape this very narrow spectrum of immunity. So the idea that these vaccines are going to produce strong, robust antibody response and protection against viruses, I don't buy that. I never bought that. And I've talked to the poultry science people who have been using these messenger RNA vaccines to vaccinate chickens, and they said the same thing. They don't work very well. They don't work very well for this very same reason. It's very narrow spectrum immunity, and the virus can immediately escape the immune system response. So I guess I've diverged here into point 4 that the messenger RNA vaccine it's not delivering broad spectrum immunity. It's delivering a very narrow spectrum of immunity that the virus can easily escape. So the benefit that you're going to be getting is going to be quite low. And if you look at what's been stated about the vaccines, it seems like that's what happened. It seems like the viruses very quickly mutated and escaped the immunity, and the messenger RNA vaccines did nothing while they were forcing people to get 4 or 5 doses of this thing, which is insanity. Again, that's a irrational response based off fear. Okay, the other reason, again, the fact that this is more akin to gene therapy really made me not want to do this to my own body. Because one of the things that, if you're a molecular biologist, you understand. If you're a molecular biologist, you understand that there's a difference. There's different molecules that make up organic systems. Okay, there's lipids, carbohydrates, nucleic acids, and proteins. Okay. And what molecular biologists understand about nucleic acids is that nucleic acids can integrate into other nucleic acids. So imagine all of us have a genome. So a genome is a long string of DNA. Okay. And every single one of our cells is composed of chromosomes. So we have 23. in the haploid state, 23 or 46 if you're doing the diploid. Chromosomes, maybe I should fact check that. 23 pairs, unless you have some diseases. 23 pairs of chromosomes, okay? And on each of these DNA molecules are strings of genes, okay? And the human genome encodes 23 to 30,000 genes, which make up the functional parts of our cells, okay? So all these genes code for little machines that build our cells. And all this blueprint is encoded in a long string of DNA. Okay, now when you start injecting messenger RNA, which is a nucleic acid, so what I'm saying is that what they're injecting into your body is the similar type of molecule as what is encoded in your DNA, okay? One of the things that can happen is that nucleic acids can come together and hybridize and do what's called recombination, okay? So there are situations where you can get recombinations of nucleic acid with nucleic acid, which would cause what's called an integration. Now, here's what they'll tell you about the vaccine, which I agree with, is that they'll say that it's highly unlikely for the messenger RNA to integrate into your genome because it's messenger RNA, not DNA, okay? And these messenger RNA, it's highly unlikely that it will recombine with DNA. But I still never wanted to get the vaccine for a few different reasons. One is our body encodes what are called reverse transcriptases. So many of the genes on our chromosomes are actually what are called parasitic DNA, which originate from viruses. So throughout evolutionary history, we have been infected with many, many, many viruses, okay? And some of these viruses encode what are called reverse transcriptases, okay? We have a bunch of these called line retrotransposons. We have many, many genes. Again, if you search this, you'll find it. We have many, many genes in our genome that are encoding these line reverse transcriptase retrotransposons, okay? And what a reverse transcriptase can do is it's an enzyme that will bind to messenger RNA, and it will create a complementary DNA, which we call cDNA copy of the messenger RNA, okay? So my original fear, why I never ever wanted to inject my body with strange messenger RNAs, is because all of our cells, all our trillions and trillions of cells, express reverse transcriptases, okay? And there is a possibility, however low, I acknowledge, probably a low possibility, there's a possibility that these reverse transcriptases can create complementary DNA, and that complementary DNA can integrate into the genome, which creates a situation where now you have a spike protein encoded in your genetic blueprint for the rest of your life that might be expressing that spike protein for the rest of your life, okay? That's why I did not want to inject my body with messenger RNA. Now, how frequently this happens, it's probably not measurable. That's one of the problems, is you probably can never measure this because our body is constituted of trillions and trillions of cells. And to find one of these integrations in amongst a trillion cells in your body, you'd have to sequence every single cell, all trillion, and investigate all trillion full genomes for integrations. You would never find it. So this is not something that scientifically can be searched for, okay? This is a possibility that can happen that cannot be measured. That's my point, is if you have trillions of cells, it's possible that this could happen and you would never ever be able to measure it. You'd never be able to see it. You'd just be able to see the phenotypes of it. Maybe you're sick, or maybe you'd get cancer, okay? The other thing that we're learning about these vaccines, so this is one possibility of integration that sort of like made me worried why I did not want to get the vaccine, okay? Maybe it's true, maybe it's not, but it's within my right as a human to be able to say, no, I don't want that because of this possibility. Okay. The second thing that we're learning is, again, I'm not going to argue whether this is true or not. I'm saying that people should investigate this and look into this, is that all the batches of the virus are not equivalent, or excuse me, all the batches of the vaccine are not equivalent, okay? So companies were mass producing batches of these vaccines and shipping them out. And one of the things that is apparently true is that or it should be investigated. I don't know. Fact check this. I don't know whether it's true. I'm not going to say any particular company did or did not do this. Not at all. That's not my business. I don't want any sort of like legal repercussions, but a possibility that can happen is when you prepare molecular biology reagents, things can become contaminated. Okay. And there's a thing in biochemistry, which is like the level of purity. The level of purity, the question is, what's the level of purity of these batches of these vaccines? Are they all equivalent, and how pure are they? Okay. And one of the things that people are worried about is if there's any DNA contamination, so DNA, we'll label that the blue. Maybe it's a plasmid, maybe it's something that comes within the process of purifying this messenger RNA. If there's any level of contamination, I'm talking like 0.01%, 0.0001%, okay? Tiny, tiny, tiny amounts of contamination, and you're injecting that into your body, injecting that contaminant DNA. Contaminant DNA could also integrate into the genome, okay? And this is a second thing that you worry about for why you would not want to subject yourself to gene therapy that you did not have to, okay? Now let me also say, I'll draw out the scenario that you'd be worried about. Okay, so one scenario is perhaps if you're injecting your body with nucleic acids, some of these nucleic acids can present conditions where they could integrate into your genome, and then now you're forever expressing whatever that nucleic acid encoded. Second thing that can happen is you can get what's called a knockout, where if you get an integration, so imagine if this is a very important, imagine here this red gene, let's say this was something very important, maybe like hemoglobin. Like hemoglobin is a protein that carries oxygen to all the cells of our body, okay? Imagine you had a situation where there was a sporadic stochastic integration of some chunk of DNA right into the middle of that gene, okay? What that would do is that would create a situation that looked like this, okay? This is a broken gene. We do this in molecular biology for experiments. We break genes all the time to see like what they do. And oftentimes what happens when you break genes is you cause cancer, okay? So this is one thing that I worried about. And again, the other thing about this is this cannot be measured. You cannot measure this because the only way to measure this would be to take a whole body of a person, separate every single one of their trillions of cells, individually sequence all their trillions of cells and look for stochastic integrations. You can't measure that. It's immeasurable. The only thing that you would be able to know is 10, 15, 20 years down the road, there might be situations where people start showing abnormal physiology. And that's one thing that cannot be measured. So the idea, one thing that they were saying is like the vaccines are proven to be safe and effective. Okay. One, we know that they were not very effective for the narrow spectrum immunity that I described above. Two, the safety. You cannot measure long-term safety of any treatment unless you've done a study that encompasses like 100 years. Okay. So we're going to find out. I don't know. Like, I'm not saying this or that, whether it was going to do this or not. No way. I'm not getting into that. I'm saying these are the reasons that I did not want to get this, is because I worried about these possibilities. Okay. Fifth thing. So all this stuff is sort of like flowing through my mind as a molecular biologist, why I was kind of skeptical of the messenger RNA vaccine. And so by the time I had even decided, I had already gotten COVID. So I guess maybe you'd call that strategic patience or unlucky. I mean, I think that's not necessarily a good strategy, strategic patience in the case of a pandemic, because what you worry about is if the pandemic was much more fatal. So that's one of the things that I think that hyped up about COVID is COVID was really only killing old fat people. And I was not an old fat person, so I was really never in fear of dying of COVID. If COVID was something that was killing children, killing young, healthy adults. I mean, there's some people who died, but in general, it was really only killing old fat people. So I was really never not ever that worried. And by the time I had decided not to get the vaccine, I had already gotten COVID and I already got over it. So then they started pushing the idea that even if you had had COVID, even if you had already developed a broad spectrum immunity against the virus, they still wanted you to get the vaccine. That was insane. I mean, that again showed another evidence of the irrationality of the response, which again made me sort of just like, okay, I'm very skeptical of everything's happening. And then the sixth thing, they tried to force it on us. So they told us that we would be fired if we did not get either the vaccine or a religious exemption. So I had to file a religious exemption just to say like I don't want to get this. And there was one time where they had a hearing session about the policy that they were developing on this when the government had mandated that essentially like all workers need to be vaccinated, otherwise they would cut off federal funding. That's what the Biden administration did, which is why they were putting me in a position where I would have to be fired if I didn't get the vaccine, and I would have been fired if that was the case. Fortunately, I got the religious exemption. But when we had the hearing session meeting, I remember going to the meeting, and I remember seeing me and the other smartest molecular biologist at my university both at this meeting, and we both made eye contact. And essentially, like what I thought I read from his eye contact was, "There's no fucking way I'm getting this." So again, sort of like a lot of people wouldn't have this because they wouldn't have the expertise in molecular biology, but just the fact that me seeing another molecular biologist who I respect really being questionable about getting this on themselves, sort of made me double down and not want to get this. Also, too, if you try to force me to do something, that's not the way to get me to do something. My natural instinct is if somebody tells me I have to do something, my natural instinct is, who the hell are you? How are you gonna how are you gonna force me to do that? Because I'm a free person. And then finally, I mean, they tried to give it to kids. I made sure that none of my kids got it because again, the kids were never at risk at COVID. So that was just some irrational paradox that demonstrated the irrationality of the response. And these are all the reasons and the thinking. Hindsight is 2020. You know, we're gonna learn a lot about this situation over the next 50 years. Hindsight's 2020. But these are all the things that were going through my mind, which caused me to decide not to get the vaccine. All right. Hope you have a good day. Don't sue me. I'm just telling what I honestly think. My opinions, just opinions. All this should be considered satirical satire.
Let the gate be opened. I shall meet death head on. Nigga Kane, you've got to get out of here. Beware foul demons and beasts there are many foes here. The time has come to cleanse my heart. This monastery reeks with evil and corruption. Oh, I hate staining my hands with the blood of foul sorcerers. Eternal suffering would be too great for you, Diablo. Let the gate be opened. I shall meet death head on. I shall meet death head on. Nigga Kane, you've got to get out of here. Beware foul demons and beasts, there are many foes here. The prime evils are no more. The prime